Hey thrill seekers, it's Richard here. Thanks for joining me. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the idea of how to price your web design projects based on value. Now, I don't know if you've come across this concept before. The idea is very simple. One of the hardest things when you're starting in your own freelance web design business is how to work out how much to charge for the website. And generally what most people do is sort of have a bit of a guess as to how many hours are going to be involved and work out what your hourly rate might be, multiply that by your estimated number of hours, and then go from there. You very quickly find out though that it's easy to underestimate the number of hours that you spend on a project. So some people then revert to an hourly rate, and that can work as well. But after I'd been in my business for some years, I realized I needed some help to grow the business. And I started working with a business coach. And he taught me a number of things, but by far the biggest thing that made all the difference to my profits was understanding what this whole concept of selling by value means. And initially I found this really hard to understand, because he said, Richard, you've still got this problem about, not selling it at the right price, not selling it for a good value price. And so I pushed back and said, but I am good value, my websites are really cheap for what you get. And he said, yeah, but that's the point. And so what he meant was the fact that you should be selling the sites based on how much value that the site is going to bring to the website owner. And so I think the easiest way to explain this is to have a look at a few examples. So I've put 3 examples together that you'll see in a moment. We're only really going to scratch the surface in this video. It's going to introduce you to the whole concept, and hopefully it does challenge you to start looking at your pricing a little bit differently, because the result for you is better, the result for your client is better. For example, at this point when I got this advice, my websites were hovering around about the $3,000 mark. But once I adopted this philosophy, they jumped way up to about the $5,000 mark. And that wasn't just good for me, it was actually better for the client to charge more, because it gave me a bit of extra profit margin, which allowed me to get better designs out, which gave the website owner a better result. So hope you enjoyed these examples. I will jump back at the end to wrap it all up. Okay, here's the first site that I have selected for you. It is a local business that I've been to a couple of times. They're a slot car shop. They have both a physical bricks and mortar store as well as an online store, but they also do in-store birthday parties for kids. I will just take you through very quickly the site. This is their homepage. It looks like a very typical DIY website development. Nothing wrong with that. Or perhaps a budget web designer. And on the one hand, it provides all the information that people need, but it doesn't really inspire me with a lot of confidence. If you go to this shop, there's an online store where there's actually quite a lot of potential to grow. Some of the products here are not cheap. So they've got controllers here, for example, that go right up to $475. If I have a look at one of these listings, perhaps if I was an enthusiast and I knew what this product was, then this would be adequate. But if I'm not, then there's no way I'm going to buy it. There's no way I'm spending $395 based on the fact there's no description and just a couple of pictures. So there's huge potential with this particular site to improve their e-commerce listings, as they're all pretty much along these lines. If you know the number of visitors to the site and their existing conversion rate, then you've got some figures that you can start playing with to say, well, what if we increased your conversion rate by 30% across the board with better photos and a greater description? What's that going to do to your bottom line? And that can help you then to determine the value on that basis. But in this case, I'm not interested so much in the e-commerce side. I'm interested in in-store parties. And you can see there's a main menu there and the gallery. I'll go ahead and click on that. And this is the page I get. And there's lots of things wrong here. If I click over here thinking, okay, show me more birthday party photos, I'm getting this generic sort of slideshow scroller thing, and not really all that helpful. Once I scroll down though, there is a lot of information, lots of text. That's good in a way, as all the information's there. But if I'm busy and flicking between a number of different potential party venues, this could have been laid out a lot more clearly so that I can quickly see that, yeah, this is right for me. However, here's the ammunition you need. If you're going in and they're a prospect who you're either trying to sell to, or they've approached you asking them to have a chat, change your conversation from, well, I can do a website and it can have this, and this feature, to let's have a look at how much more this website could make for you. Let's do that now just on the basis of their birthday parties. Because I've been there before, I know that the cost to put these parties on is very low. They have the staff in the store there already. I suspect that they're not bringing in any additional staff, so there's no additional costs. Could be wrong there, but that's one of the questions that you ask in that discovery meeting. So if you were to get an extra booking or two per weekend as a result of a better website, their additional costs would be almost negligible. They give out, for example, little, those little cheap plasticky medals that they put around the kids' necks once they have done the slot car racing, so everyone feels like a winner. So apart from that, there's not a lot of cost. And when I went through these figures, I realised that based on parties that I've been to where there tends to be 15 or 20 kids, they're probably making about $200 to $250, maybe $300 on average per party. So my conversation then becomes, well, I'm confident that once we build you a better website, that you're going to be able to get an extra 2 or 3 bookings, possibly a week. But what if it was just maybe 3 extra a month? Let's open the calculator and assume that they're making on average $250 profit, that is after their costs, so profit per party, times 3 extra parties a month equals that, $750 a month more profit. So additional money that they weren't getting before. Now the question becomes, well, how long would a business be prepared to wait to get a return on their website development investment, ROI, return on investment? And I'm going to argue 6 months. If somebody came to me and said and convinced me that I could invest in something and I'd get my money back in 6 months, that's a good deal. $750 times 6 equals $4,500, and that's without even considering the e-commerce side of the site. So what does that mean? Ladies and gentlemen, that means that this website is worth $4,500 development charge. All right, it's not worth it at the moment, but with that sort of money, you could easily either hire some people if you need some help to come in and take some really good photos, or do it all yourself if you've got those skills. You don't have to charge that, of course. You might be perfectly happy with $2,000. But I want you to start thinking that if you're caught sort of in the $1,000 to $2,000 to $3,000 development cost area, that you can think bigger than that. Let's move on to our second one. Well, this second one that I've chosen for you might seem like a bit of a surprise at first, but bear with me. If you can see past the fact that this is an industry that isn't exactly the most happy to work in, there's potentially a lot of money here. In fact, for some of you, you might even think of using this one as your niche. If websites are all like this anyway, because this is a really good example of where you can add a lot of value, I believe, to this business's profit. Okay, this is a funeral director business. Now, I don't know if that's a universal term. That's the term that we use here in Australia. Somebody who looks after a funeral. Sadly, at my age, 48, I have been through this a couple of times already. And as if you have, you know how difficult and stressful that process can be. Therefore, you're not really thinking so much about money at this point, although that is an issue. You're more concerned about whether the funeral director that you're going to select will be able to take care of everything as smoothly as possible. And I'm going to argue that this website doesn't do that at the moment. So let's have a look at the site very quickly. That's the home page, that's everything there. And can you see the thing that jumped out to me straight away? Okay, so at my age, I can't avoid the fact that I have to wear reading glasses now. And even with my glasses on, that tiny welcome text there is really hard to read. It's very small font, and it's not a good font choice. And so keep in mind when you're building sites that not everyone is your age necessarily. If you're under 40, wait, the same thing's going to happen to you. Everyone has to get readers at some point. And so I actually really encourage people to always use at least a 16-point font size on website design. Certainly with the majority of the text stuff in footers, you can get away with something a bit smaller. The rest of the site, there's a history page, which is sort of interesting. There's a funerals page with lots of links and small text. There's a contact page with a map that doesn't work. And they've actually got 2 locations you can see in the top right, but there's actually only a map for one of them. And there's a links page here. Okay, so we're only interested though in how can we add value to this business owner. And the challenge that you might be thinking straight away is, yeah, but I don't know. How do you know anything about the funeral director industry? Well, use Google. Here's what I found when I Googled average funeral cost. And you can see there's $7,000. That's a US article. $7,000 to $9,000 in the US according to this. I don't know when that was. Oh yeah, 2019. Here in Australia though, as I scroll down, I find an article that suggests that you might be expected to pay somewhere between 4 to 15 grand for a funeral. And in my experience, I've got to tell you that is true. Now this particular business is based in a relatively wealthy part of Sydney, and I would safely assume that they would be on the higher end. So I'm going to say that maybe their typical fee is $10,000 to put a funeral together. Let's keep that in mind. So average cost might be about 10 grand. Now the next thing you want to know is what the margin is. Again, how do you know their margin? Well, in your discovery meeting, you can ask that question. You need to approach this by saying, look, in order to come up with the most appropriate solution for you, the one that's going to give you the best profit, I need to know some of your figures. Are you comfortable sharing that with me? Most people in my experience say yes, especially if you just explain it the way that I did. But again, it's helpful to have that information when you go into the meeting so that if what they tell you matches up with what you have discovered, and you can see that big snippet up the top that says the average gross profit margin across the funeral industry is 62.5%. Whee! That's not bad. But then it goes on to qualify independent operators may barely squeeze a margin of 10 to 30%. I actually think that's probably, my gut tells me that's closer to the mark. I suspect maybe 30 here, but let's just say it was 20. Let's say the average profit margin is 20. With those two bits of information, 20% profit margin and $10,000 per funeral, you know that, I'll just head back to their site, that every sale, and I know that sounds really crass, but every sale that they make is going to bring them in, about $2,000 profit. I say it's crass because it's just awful to think of, I guess, a funeral as a sale, but it is. It's a business, and at the end of the day, they need more clients. The other bit of ammunition that I would take in here just before you work out the price is having a look at their competitor. So when I do a search for their suburb, which happens to be called Chatswood, so funeral director Chatswood, this is what comes up. Get a few ads, get a map, I get an ad, and here they are here. So a couple of other things worth noting is that they don't have any reviews, and their competitor underneath them has, okay, only one review, but boy, don't those 5 stars jump out at you. And then when you look at their competitor's website, it takes you initially to an internal page showing you that particular branch, but look at the home page. So much better. They've got a professional photo done there, all these really interesting old photos. Who do you reckon's getting the business? Okay, this just oozes confidence. I'm ringing them. So that's what I would tell them. And when you go through the other pages, they're equally good. So then I come back and say, well, grab our calculator again. Do you feel that with a fresh design like your competitor's design, and with perhaps a couple of other things that you can do, like trying to get them some reviews there in Google, that we could get you an extra one, I reckon that's really conservative, but an extra 1 sale a month? If they agree, it is worth to them an extra $2,000 a month. Times, again, they might be happy with a 6-month ROI. I still think that's fantastic. That's $12,000. Folks, that website development is worth $12,000. That's how much extra money it's going to bring in for them. So that's a really interesting one. That's not necessarily what you should charge, but of course, when you've got that sort of margin available, you're able to do things like get in a professional photographer, or if, like me, you're not really a designer and you're just using templates and things, you can get a custom design done, no problem, and still leave you tons of margin for yourself. Okay, something a little bit happier this time. Let's take a holiday. This is a website for an accommodation provider in a smallish sort of region of my state called Kangaroo Valley. And yes, there are kangaroos here. And this particular provider that I have chosen is very typical of the sorts of accommodation website that you'll come across in more remote areas. And it's incredibly frustrating as someone who likes to book holidays for a largish family, because quite often the photos really don't tell the story as to what I'm likely to experience, and therefore I can't book. So here's the homepage. The first time I came across here, I didn't even notice that there was a link up the top right here for a video. Videos are great. Your conversion rates always are stronger with videos, except in this case where it's broken. So there's the very first thing that I'd be recommending to this prospect. Get your video back up and running, because that is the thing that can definitely sell more accommodation. So the challenge that I come across is you go to look at the accommodation, you might get a page like this. Tiny photos, and no, you cannot click on them to see what's going on. There is absolutely no way that I can tell from those photos whether or not this is going to be suitable for a family of 6. Even when you click this link, you just get a whole bunch of text. Now, this does tell you the story, but it doesn't really show me. And that whole adage of show me, don't tell me is really important when it comes to accommodation, so that you can make the decision. Therefore, if there was a similar accommodation provider elsewhere that did do that, that's where I'm going to book. So let's see where the value is being lost in this particular case. If I go to the rates page, you can see the third column across headed all weekends, that a 2-bedroom cottage is $325 per night. And the line just above that says minimum 2-night stay preferred. So, you know, they're making a lot of money. This is not cheap accommodation, yet they're, I suspect, missing out on a lot of potential as a result. So how do you work out the value? Well, there's a couple of things that I'm thinking of. The first is, keep in mind that for every additional booking that this business gets is almost all going to be profit. Okay, what I mean by that is there's not a lot of direct expense involved in booking another room out. Sure, there's the expense of all the little soaps and shampoos that you steal. There's also housekeeping that to pay for a cleaner to come in after you leave to tidy up the room. But apart from that, there's not really a lot in additional costs unless you trash the room. So it's therefore a good thing to have as many bookings as possible. That one question mark I've got though is housekeeping, because I don't know the industry. I wonder what it costs to actually clean a room. It'd be nice to know that. So I did a Google search here for housekeeping costs accommodation, and after scrolling down I found an article, and you can just see in the summary here that it suggests that somebody is being paid $5 to clean a room that costs guests $300 a night. It really should be a crime. Now, I know they're not paid much. I guess cleaners are probably the worst paid of just about any industry. $5 for a room is pretty appalling. Now, to be fair, that's probably city rates, and I suspect you won't be able to get a housekeeper in a more remote area at that sort of fee. But even if it was, say, $20, $20 plus, $5 worth of bits and pieces means that they're still making probably $300 per night for every extra booking that they get. Therefore, my conversation would go along the lines of, first of all, it'd be nice to know some figures like how many visitors they're getting to the site and what their existing conversion rate is. When you've got those figures, you can say, well, look, if we were able to get you, say, an extra, realistically, I actually think you could get an extra 2 or 3 bookings a week based on this site, but let's just say 3 bookings a month. Let's bring our calculator back into play and have a look at that. So we're saying that they're making about $300 a night, and we've got 3 more of those bookings. That means every month there's another $900 times our 6-month ROI means that you could quite happily justify a $5,400 website in this case. Frankly, I think a little bit more, get some really good photos in and so forth. But if again, you're sort of stuck in the mindset that, oh, well, there's only about 12 pages on the site and, it's a pretty simple site to put together, therefore I'll charge $2,000. You are doing yourself a disservice by not getting what you're worth, but you're also doing the client a disservice. This whole exercise isn't about trying to squeeze every last dollar out of your client. It's about providing the most appropriate solution for their needs. Because once you're charging that sort of money, you've got a little bit more headroom to be able to pay for a photographer or perhaps to get a custom design done. And so that's the sort of dollars that I would be considering on this occasion. Well, I hope you found those examples helpful and that you now have a bit of an understanding of what this whole concept of selling by value is about. Once again, it's not about squeezing the last dollar out of your client. It's about making you some more money, sure, but it's also making your client some more money. A true win-win situation. If you want to fight me on this, feel free. I fought my business coach for a while, and it wasn't until I really got this concept under my belt and tried it out that I really saw how it made sense. So comment below if you've got any thoughts about that. If you want to resist, I'm happy to have a conversation. You might also like to, if this is your first time here, hit that whole subscribe and bell notification thing. I've got some more videos coming up in the next couple of weeks, which will expand on both this topic and other ways that you can grow your web design business profits. I also put together a regular email newsletter that you might like to subscribe to with more tips like this, and you'll find a link to that in the description. Hey, thanks again for joining me today, and look forward to your questions. See you next time.